And I think another failure, I think for me was I'm a single parent, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, my mother was a single parent. So I didn't grow up with my father in the home. And I know that my plan in my life was that if I have a child, I'm going to plan. I'm going to make sure that my.
Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to another episode of the Survival Skills Podcast, where we find or we explore survival skills for the 21st century through the power of conversation. So today we have Claire Mawisa as our guest, and Claire actually is a producer and a presenter of the popular show on Mnet, Carte Blanche. For those of you who don't know what Carte Blanche is a South African investigative journalism television series that airs on Mnet during prime time. And as for Claire, she has a solid media industry track record spanning over 2 decades. She started off her career in 1993 as a model, and the following year, at the age of 15, she appeared on the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine. This accolade led her to grace covers of leading magazines, hosted television and radio shows. Claire is an influential and celebrated media personality. So we had a very, very incredible conversation with Claire. Actually, it's one of my favorite podcasts that I've recorded during the lockdown. And we discussed investigative journalism, relationships and marriage, single parenthood, and also the current events, especially that by the time we recorded this, there was the issue of George Floyd. So we also talked a little bit about that. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Remember, this is also available on video. I'll put the link in the description of this podcast. But if you go on YouTube at Survival Skills Podcast, you should definitely be able to find it as well, and you can watch it if you prefer that version. Otherwise, I would appreciate it if you give the Survival Skills Podcast a good 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Anyway, enjoy my conversation with Claire. Thank you. So, let's start talking about what's going on right now. But maybe you should introduce yourself first. Who do you know yourself as, besides what the world know you for?
Who do I know myself as?
Yeah.
I know myself as a storyteller.
Right.
I love listening to people's stories. I love sharing my story. And my job, people know me from Carte Blanche. And essentially people say, so what does that mean? And I'm like, I go and I find stories that I think would resonate with people and to tell them as best as I can. And so I feel like I'm a medium and I help people tell their stories. And if people are willing to listen to my story, I'm happy to tell it.
Right. So for those of you guys listening to or watching Claire Mawisa from Carte Blanche. And, I just got on Carte Blanche only recently on YouTube because I don't watch TV as much at all. So I saw it. I was like, wow, this is really a compressed way of telling stories, like very in-depth, other than just the typical TV news and stuff. So then I started digging into it, the team behind it. That's pretty much how I learned about you. And how did you even get started with that? Like, what is your story?
Okay, cool. Well, I think I broke into the industry initially when I was scouted as a model. So I modeled from when I was 14, 15 years old. And
when was that?
Sorry?
When was that? When
that
did
was
you
in
get
1994.
Wow.
So I was 14 years old. I was in high school. I was with my friends and I was scouted by a model boss owner. They owned the agency and they said that they thought I'd make a good model. And so they gave me their business card and that's how my modeling career started. And that was, I think, my first step into the industry as people knew me. So if you think of media or entertainment industry, and at that time it was a big deal because there weren't many Black South African models that were modeling. I think the Black international models we knew were the famous ones that everyone knew, like the Naomis. And so my modeling career happened throughout of my high school. And just after high school, I was about 2-3 years into varsity, I was approached by SABC and the SABC at that time had continuity presenters, and continuity presenters are basically those presenters that used to pop up in between TV shows and tell you what the TV program was looking like for that evening. They would throw forward to the movies that would be coming up, or the TV series, or the soap operas. And they were looking for a presenter, and they wanted to know if I was keen. They had seen my modeling pictures. And I thought that was a great opportunity. So I said yes. And so that's how I got into TV. And continuity presenting, well, then obviously opened lots of other TV opportunities for me. And one of the TV opportunities that came my way was the fact that I would present little TV shows while also doing continuity presenting. And one of the TV shows that I presented, the executive producer, his name was George. And George and I worked on a little reality TV show where we would find people and give them makeovers. Women love makeovers. And so we'd give them makeovers. And George and I worked together. The sponsor of the show, I think, was Revlon. And the show had one season, and unfortunately it wasn't picked up again. And we worked really well together, George and I, and we really enjoyed each other's creative process. And we went our separate ways. George continued to do TV, and I was doing radio and lots of other things. Fast forward about 15 years, I bump into George, having not seen him in 15 years. And George said that he thought he had an opportunity for me. And I asked what that opportunity was. And he said it was Carte Blanche. And he said that he remembers that we worked well together in the makeover show. And he wanted to find out whether I would be keen to do Carte Blanche. And I mean, I've grown up watching Carte Blanche, and Carte Blanche is a very serious, news-orientated current affairs show, very different from what George and I had done all those years ago. And I didn't know if I was the right person, but he said, try it out. Let's do a few stories and let's see how you go. Well, I guess I'm still doing a few stories 5 years later because I'm still at Carte Blanche, loving it. So that's actually how I got into doing Carte Blanche. It was the executive producer who I'd worked with before. I did an audition and everyone was like, she could be a good fit. So I started my Carte Blanche journey 5 years ago.
Wow, that's very impressive. And one thing, actually, I don't know if you know this, but by revealing when you started, you sort of revealed your age at the same time. You must have the best. You must have the best genetics in the world.
I love telling people my age. I'm 41. I'm turning 42 this year in October. I love, you know what I mean? I think there's that whole taboo thing of people not knowing your age. I think it ended with our mothers and our fathers' generation. Right. I think people are firmly looking incredible. Like if Janet Jackson and if J.Lo and Naomi Campbell can look as fierce as they're looking, still being successful in their 50s, I mean, really, there's no shame in that game. And so I think the population or the society needs to do what it can to like kill ageism. Do you know what I mean? There's aging shouldn't be a scary thing. People should look forward to aging. So
no, I think when it comes to people like you, it's just that the sort of the cosmetic companies use guys like you to sort of give people a false impression of what they're gonna look like. I mean, it's probably genetics. You guys are just lucky as hell, you know, and it's unfair, but it is what it is. So, you know, with TV now, I would like to know, how do you go about producing a show like Carte Blanche? And because you guys touch on very sensitive topics, who come up with the ideas of this is the story we should cover, and this we don't want to talk about? Do you have a structure or a team that actually selects what to talk about and whatnot? But I'm sure you also sort of get pulled by the political wings as well, because, you know, South Africa is a very sensitive country. I don't know how you go about massaging all that.
Yeah, so we've got the team at Carte Blanche is made up of the presenters that you see on screen and then the producers. So we've got about 15 producers. We have a group of researchers, there are about 6 researchers. And then we've got people that work in terms of the editing, camera people, sound that actually shoot. And what we do once a week is that before the pandemic, we used to get together and have an editorial meeting. And in that editorial meeting, everyone would pitch a story or a few stories on what they think would be interesting. So we are known for our investigatives. So all of our investigative stories of um, busting a crook or finding somebody who is scamming people. And if we find someone who's doing that, taking advantage of people. So we pitch those stories. We also know that we need to pitch news stories, so news that are developing or came up in that week that is still fresh and top of mind for people. We pitch those news stories, and we pitch stories about developments like science and technology. We talk about feel-good stories and anything that we think would be of national interest. And in that editorial meeting, so I will come up with an idea and I'll say, guys, I think this is an interesting story. And I pitch my idea and who we would be able to interview. And if the team likes that idea, we discuss it further. Or if the team says we need to develop that story further, the team would suggest that. But the ultimate, decision lies with the executive producer and the managing editors. They then take all of those ideas and they decide whether we will do them or not. And then they will commission a story. We try to just make sure that we're on the pulse of what people are hungry for. What is the appetite,
Right.
Just before we went into lockdown, we didn't have COVID-19 stories, but in lockdown, the appetite for coronavirus pandemic stories was high. Everyone wanted to know, what is this virus about? Where can I get it? What must I do to avoid getting it? Am I more susceptible to it? So then we needed to make sure that the stories we're pitching really were in line with that. So it really is a shifting, it's fluid, different things are happening in the world all the time. Now Black Lives Matter is foremost on people's minds. And children going back to school is what people are thinking about, because that is what's happening right now. So there's a big team behind what you see as the final product on air. And we're always trying to brainstorm, what do our viewers want to see? And what can we do to get that story to them?
Okay, I'm very impressed by how much television has evolved to be this sort of fast medium productive machine, because it used to take very long for people to produce content, but now even Netflix, it's like you heard of a story just a month ago, there's already a show about it, like how this guy's getting this done. So what are the limits when you're doing investigative journalism? I mean, I think what hooked me up on Carte Blanche was that aspect of investigative journalism, not just reporting news as typically. What are the limits in terms of how deep can you guys go? You actually reach out to the people who are originally connected to the stories and you ask them questions. What is the response when you contact someone, say, to investigate a fraud case or corruption, and you contact them to comment on it? What typically is the response that you get? Do they deny you, or they're like, I'm going to get exposed by these guys or something like that?
So, I mean, when somebody has a story, so if there is a story about fraud or corruption, we must make sure that we can prove without a shadow of a doubt that that's real, that information is credible. So we need to get witnesses. We need to get the person that they were doing the corruption with. We need to get even the bad guys on camera and for them to talk. And once we can secure the people that are behind the scenes to talk, only then do we then approach the person who was doing the corruption, or the person who was orchestrating the scam. And we tell them, listen, we'd like to sit down with you because these allegations have come up. And either they say, Some of them say yes because, I mean, they feel invincible and they probably have been getting away with it for a long time. So they feel very brave and they think, oh, they can never prove it. And so some of them actually do say yes and allow us to come and talk to us because they might not know how much information we have against them, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously some people say no, and it's our obligation to get a response from them. As journalists, there's a we live by a certain code and we are held up against a certain code against the Broadcasting Complaints Commission. So we have to also just make sure that we can't just accuse you of doing something. We need you to respond to it, whether that's in writing or on a on-camera interview. But I mean, when somebody does say yes, or we do find someone, if we can't find, if they're not willing to respond or take our calls, we will find them and we will put a camera in their face and we will put the allegations to them. And usually people have one or two responses. One, they will continue to deny it, even though we've got irrefutable evidence.
Right.
We'll say, do you know John? And they were like, no, I don't know John. Well, John says you stole his money. I didn't steal John's money. And then we show them a picture of them with John. Then we show them about bank accounts. Then we show them video footage of, and then, you can see them starting to crumble. But they will deny until, as much as they can. And then the other response that you get is that people will immediately admit to it and say, yes, this is what I've been doing, because I think they realize that they've been caught and the jig is up and they can't run anymore. So, and you never know what you're going to get. You never know when you're sitting in front of somebody accusing them of something or bringing their dirty laundry to light. You just don't know, whether they're going to get aggressive with you, whether they're going to cry, whether they're going to, just completely shut down. So we go into those interviews expecting anything.
Right. So, one thing also is that I've identified over the years that just investigative journalists sort of really became very good at finding the truth, right? In a very short period of time, as compared to law enforcement in most cases. It's like, you guys with very limited resources, you're pretty much able to get to the bottom of the story and find the truth, when the law enforcement will tell you that, we're still investigating, there's this and that. Have you reached to a point where some law enforcement use your data to sort of work on a case or anything like that?
Yes, I mean, you're right. Sometimes we will focus our energies on a particular story. And you must remember, sometimes people are willing to talk to us because they know there aren't real repercussions, right? So a bad guy is willing to actually give us information, or an informant is willing to give us information because they know we can't arrest them. And, sometimes we just want the information to tell the story. But sometimes if we get enough good information, we will take it to law enforcement, and we will either record a bust, if a bust happens, if it's a drug case, or if it's a smuggling case. We will inform the authorities, and they will usually they'll be like, thank you so much, and they'll act on it. They'll use their information, gather more intelligence, and they'll catch the bad guys. But what's heartbreaking is that sometimes, even if we do all the work and we tell them this is where the bad guys are, this is what they're doing, this is who they're working with, they still won't actually use that information to bring them to book. So sharing our information with law enforcement doesn't guarantee an arrest or doesn't guarantee that something is going to happen.
Okay, so you're doing this whole work on the show. What are your thoughts, or how do you feel about law enforcement in general after all the work you've been doing on the show?
I think there are really, the majority of law enforcement that we have in our country are people that are doing their best. They are under-resourced, so they're good guys. They're working their cases. They're working the information that they have. They're really trying to do their best. But there are some bad apples. There's some of them who are either underpaid or overworked and decide, you know what, if I just turn away, if I just look away, while these people continue doing drugs and they give me a cut, I can feed my family and I can, you know, realize some sort of dream for my family. And so, you know, it's tough to keep on expecting people who are really not getting the support, like our law enforcement, our police officers, our detectives, our investigating officers. You know, they're doing hard work, they're putting their lives on the line, and they're not getting compensated enough for that work. And you know, it's tough for them to stay motivated when they are not enough of them. But the majority of them, I do believe, are doing the best they can with what they've got to catch bad guys and to make the society a safer place. But like in any organization, there are some bad apples, and catching them, for me, is important. And it happens. It does happen.
What do you consider are your most top failures, like 1, 2, or 3 in your or over your life?
Okay, like my number one failure, I think, was with radio. What I spoke about earlier is, you know, I had a dream and I thought I'd be able to realize my dream. I was successful on TV and I thought I'd be a great on-air presenter on radio. I thought I'd have a drive time show and everyone would listen to me, and that didn't happen. And they gave me a chance and another chance, and it just didn't happen. And that really, it made me have to just rethink my entire plan, what my life plan would be. So not succeeding as on-air talent really humbled me. You know, it knocked the wind out of my lungs. So that for me was a huge failure in my eyes. It did redirect me to another place where I did flourish. But I do, you know, it's a bit of it still pinches me when I think about it. So that was number one. Another failure, I think, for me was I started my science degree in 1997. I was studying at UCT, and I wanted to work in science. I'm obsessed with science and biology, and I was majoring in microbiology and biochemistry, and I thought, you know, I was going to find a career in that. And I was paying my way through varsity and using my modeling money. So I was modeling and I was attending varsity, and I just couldn't keep up with the payments. I couldn't afford it. My parents couldn't afford to send me to varsity. And I remember just a week before we were going to write exams, third-year exams in my BSc, I got a letter saying that you've been financially excluded from this institution. If you do not pay your school fees, you won't be able to write exams. And I went begging and pleading to my vice chancellor, to the dean of science, my lecturers, and none of them could help me. And that's how I kind of ended my degree with like a year and a bit to go. And that changed the trajectory of my life. You know, that changed my entire life. Because had I graduated from science, I might not have gotten into TV at all. Yes. And I would not have gotten into radio maybe. So that took me a good 10 years to get over. So yes, I was on TV. Yes, I was successful on TV. Yes, I was successful in modeling and I was getting into radio. But when I was at home and I was alone, the idea that you know, people would say, did you finish your degree? And they would call me a dropout. And that would be like, oh my God. That would be like a stab in my heart that they would call me a dropout. And it took me a long time to forgive myself and to realize that maybe that was supposed to be the course of my life.
Right.
You know, so that for me was huge. And I think another failure, I think for me was, I'm a single parent, you know. Mm-hmm. I grew up, my mother was a single parent. So I didn't grow up with my father in the home. And I know that my plan in my life was that if I have a child, I'm gonna plan. I'm gonna make sure that the father of my child is present and engaged. And I made sure that I'll ask the right questions. And so I planned my child with my partner. And even with all of my good intentions, he still chose to leave. And and now I call myself a single parent. And when I say those words, it also makes me feel like a failure. I feel like I failed my son. There's also nothing I could have actually done. You can't actually control how somebody else behaves, but it's a painful thing, you know, when you realize that this is not what you had wanted, but here you are.
Right.
So I think for me, those probably are my three biggest failures, but also the biggest lessons. You know, like if you're not learning from your failures, then like, what are you doing? You have to learn from every time you fall.
So let's take the third one and just look into that a little bit. So, I mean, I think we can say the philosophy of love, or building marriage, or parenting, right? These are things that we have embedded in us for longer periods of time, and you know they're included in our expectations. But what I've always thought is that, you know, these require an extra person other than yourself, and you're never going to be able to control what the other person does. So what do you think of the idea of what you had before, what you wanted to do before? Like, okay, I want to have kids, I want to have the other parent with me all together, you know, a full pack sort of marriage or relationship. And that's not what happened. So how do you look at, say, marriage or relationships now?
You know, I think, okay, so for marriage, I think it's an amazing institution, but I don't think it's for everyone.
Right.
I think marriage is amazing. It's incredible. If the two right people choose it, it's great for them. But I think the mistake is that we all think that all of us are supposed to get married. I don't think that's realistic, and I don't think marriage as an institution is made for everyone. People can have life partners or whatever they choose to define their relationships. Feel free to do that. But I don't know if marriage is for everyone. I don't think it is. And, you know, I remember growing up, you know, it was just my mother, my brother, and I. And I always used to think that I'm missing out on something because my father wasn't there. And yes, I probably did miss out on something. I don't deny that. I probably did miss out on a lot. But I also don't think that a single parent family now means that the child needs to lack in any way, shape, or form. You know, it doesn't mean that I can't bring in, if I have a boy, so now I'm more focused on bringing in same-sex role models for him. He needs to have a positive role model in his life. And that can be my brother, that can be my male cousins. Those can be men that I have found that are in my life in different ways that can influence him in a positive way. So, right. And I realized that parenting, yes, it does take more than one person, but it also kind of takes a village. So, you know, it's the influence that the teachers have, it's the friends that I keep around me, it's the people that I choose to introduce my son to that should have a positive impact. So, you know, I'm trying not to be jaded about the whole situation, because I do know that people have found amazing relationships. So I think I don't want people to feel like they are less than, they are not good enough if they do not get the ideal, because I think that's what I had for a long time. I used to think there must be something wrong with me if I'm not getting what I wanted. But I soon realized that actually I need to realize that I'm a whole. I'm a full and present whole person. And if I find somebody else, they need to be a full and present whole person. We don't necessarily have to complete each other. We don't come 50-50 in this game. I don't come 50% and you bring 50%. I have to bring 100%, and you better bring 100% to it for us to have a full human experience and to reap the rewards of being with one another. So that whole idea, I know it was romantic in the Tom Cruise movie to say you complete me, but it makes people then feel like if they are alone, that they're walking around as a shell, or they're walking around inadequate, or they're walking around that they're not good enough. So that is a real misconception of what relationships are supposed to do. Somebody's supposed to be there to be a witness to your life, elevate your life. But happiness and joy is your personal responsibility.
Yes.
Nobody is supposed to bring happiness in your life. You're supposed to make yourself happy. And if you can also bring some joy to somebody else, then you've won the jackpot. But when somebody says that you're not fulfilling your role in making me happy, those are when red flags should be coming up, you know. So it really is a personal responsibility in your life to make yourself happy, for you to make sure that you have all your amazing experiences. And if you find somebody along the way who has similar values and principles, who wants to also bring joy in your life and elevate your life in a way that they can, more power to that. Like that for me is like the jackpot.
Right. Well, that's a very good, elaborate answer. Look, so I'm still building my philosophy on this, but do you think that love should be forever? Because I think this still ties into the whole ideal relationship or marriage or togetherness that we have been told through Hollywood movies and stuff. And to the point that I think people demand too much of others, or they have high expectations from other people. And then now that becomes the sort of offset or outsource part of themselves to other people. And then, you know, when that is not met, they become unhappy. So do you think love, to be real, should be like forever?
I don't necessarily think love, I don't necessarily think that love is meant to be forever. I think you will love some people in your life forever, whether you're with them or not. You know what I mean? I think we fall in love and we love people and they bring joy and we learn from them. And that is really beautiful. That's why I say some people should get married, because I feel like there are some people who do find, you know, in some weird way, they find their mate and they find their partner and they click. And that doesn't happen for everyone. But if it does happen for you, then you are lucky enough to find that person that you are supposed to love and be in your life forever. But I think love has lots of different flavors, you know.
Yes.
You can love someone truly and deeply, and you can decide that maybe this is not the right person for me to share my life with, you know, or maybe they were supposed to come into your life for a season. You're supposed to learn certain lessons about yourself or about them. And, you know, it's okay to love somebody from a distance and realize that, you know, you can always maybe be part of their life in another way, shape, or form. It doesn't necessarily mean to be their partner. But I don't necessarily think either that if you were in a relationship with somebody for 2 years and you love them, or you were in a relationship with somebody for 6 months and you loved them and they loved you, I don't think that when you break up, that love wasn't real. I still think that love was real. You know what I mean? I think you were fully present in that 6 months, or they were fully present in that 6 months. And you gave each other the best of yourselves. You elevated yourselves. You became better people. You enjoyed each other's company. You discovered things about yourself in that 6 months. And if it ends, it doesn't discount the fact that that last 6 months was high quality living, and they brought something genuine to your life. So I don't think that all love is supposed to be forever. And I think it puts too much pressure on one person to fulfill your every need. You know, that's an unfair expectation on anyone. You know, I think I always try to think of it as a holistic experience, like in my life. So I have work, and my work fulfills me. I enjoy what I do. You know, I get stimulated in a certain way there, and I enjoy that. I have my friends, and my friends, you know, I love my friends in all their different ways. You know I can party with that one. I know I can get deep with this one. I know I can talk about, you know, intellectual ideas with another one. But I love my friends, and they fulfill their role in my life. And I love my family, and my family fulfills a certain role. And your partner also has their own role. You know what I mean? And so holistically, you know, you've got different things that should be feeding you, and you should be feeding off those things. And to try and expect that one individual is supposed to fulfill all of that is really unrealistic and unfair on that person, because they too have their own joy to seek, and they too have their own mission in life and their own goals that actually might not even involve you as their partner. So yeah, so I don't think all love is supposed to be forever. If it is forever, amazing, that's great. But does it mean that my 6-month relationship wasn't real? No, it means that it was just as real.
Follow the money or follow your passion?
Follow your passion, because your passion brings the money.
I don't agree with that, but okay.
So let me qualify that statement. So there are many times in life when I wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing. So my passion might have been one thing. So my passion was radio, but because I couldn't get into radio, I needed to work at a shop and fold clothes to feed myself. But folding clothes was never going to bring me ultimate joy, ultimate success, and ultimate money. It was never going to do that, because I wasn't going to, my heart wasn't in the folding of the clothes and making sure that that store was clean. It didn't belong to me. I didn't like the clothes. So sometimes you have to do what you have to do to get to do what you want to do. So do what you have to do right now. So if your passion is not bringing in your money, find something that will bring in money, whatever that is, even if it's a temporary job, and do that. But don't take your eye off your passion, because once you are working in your passion, you will work harder than anyone else in the building. Once you are in the building doing what you want. I was the first to arrive. When I was working at Kaya, I was the first to arrive and the last person to leave, because I couldn't believe I could do this work. And because of that, I got raised. I got a raise, I got more money, and I was earning more money than I ever had been earning, because I was willing to put in the extra work. Other people thought it was work. I just thought I was having a good time. I was like, wow, I can't believe I get to do this. So follow your passion enough, sharpen your skills in your passion, and you will be blown away about the amount of money that you can earn. You'll be blown away. And you know what? It's a byproduct. So when you're working in your passion and you're working hard in your passion, the money and all of the benefits are a byproduct. It's just a bonus, because you still get to do what you want to do. So it's a roundabout way, but it doesn't mean that I was always only ever working in my passion. I had to sweep floors. I needed to fold clothes. I needed to work in storerooms. I needed to do the dirty work when nobody was, giving me a chance in what I wanted to do. I needed to intern for free. I needed to volunteer. And I was like, wow, this is not the life I planned for myself. But I knew that in that moment, I had to do that menial work. I had to do what I had to do to eventually get to what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? And I think if you have an attitude that there's no decent work that's beneath you, I think a lot of people think, I'm too good for that. I can't scrub floors.
I think that is the biggest pitfall for our graduates, that they think that when they graduated, then a whole lot of other things are beneath them. And then, you just end up broke and no job at all.
100%, you've hit the nail on the head. If you go into the world knowing that you are willing to do any honest work, it keeps you honest. It keeps you real in the world and present. So if you're not willing to sweep the floors or mop the floors, if you're not willing to do stock taking, and if you think that's beneath you, you're not going to go very far in life. I think a lot of the people that we see doing amazing things on TV or even role models, CEOs and, managing directors, people that are running, Fortune 500 companies, blue chip companies. Trust me, at some point they needed to do something that, was technically beneath them, but there's nothing wrong. There's nothing beneath doing an honest day's work, because the money that gets paid at the end of the day still can buy you that food and still can pay that rent. So, I think, you really need to be flexible about how you get to your end goal. It's not a linear thing.
Right.
Point A to point B is never linear. It's not one straight line with a ruler. It's one of those squiggly lines, and it takes forever to get to point B, and sometimes you don't realize that even in that menial work that you're doing, you can't see how it's connected to your passion at all.
Yeah.
But looking back, when you connect the dots, you realize, okay, there's value that even that menial job is bringing to this passion project that I've got. So you might disagree, but I still say follow the passion.
Yeah, follow the money on my side, you know, all the way. So lastly, with what's going on right now in the world, I think, so here's my thesis, right? And I'm asking you this question because you're a parent and I'm not. So my thesis is that the challenge that we have in the world, all these other, you know, racism or inequality, is just an exhibit of a systematic flaw that you cannot really resolve the actual problems without addressing the system itself. So, and the flaw itself is that I think obedience is the biggest flaw in humanity, because if you think of, say, if we say Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin is the most powerful man in the world, right? Well, technically that's not true. It's only true theoretically, you know, in all these ideal systems that we created, because, you know, he has to command a team of soldiers, and those individuals have to act on his will, right? If they don't, then he's powerless, right? So that, to begin with, is a systematic flaw from my perspective. Another thing is, if you are raised in a Christian home, as a child, you're considered a Christian yourself, right? And that's how religion is preserved, is through generations and through families. So Christian families raise Christian children. Islamic families raise, you know, children of that cloth. So if you look at all those things, it shows you that the obedient child to their parent, if the parents are racist, will be racist themselves as well, pretty much as religion goes. So the flaw there is obedience. You know, you have to be, everyone has to create their own way of thinking. If we look different across the board, everyone has a unique face, unique everything, we should also be able to think uniquely. But that's not what seems to be happening. So you as a parent, how can you guarantee that you're not just raising another version of yourself? Because primarily as parents, that's what we, you know, that's what they do, is that you try to raise someone based on your values and things that you believe in. And it's very hard to let go of the control, to let the child go out on their own way and develop their own way. So what do you think about that?
You know, on some level, I do agree, you know, about the fact that we tend to perpetuate our beliefs onto the next generation. But I also do believe that many millions of people that were obedient children still grew up to be independent thinkers. And so for me, it's about encouraging that independent thinking, but also encouraging that intuition. I think you know when something doesn't sit right with you, or you know when you're uncomfortable about a topic or conversation or a belief or something that just doesn't, you know, gel with you. And it's about being able to identify that discomfort within you or that intuition within you that's saying, hold up, this is not cool. And for me, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that my child can identify that feeling, and for him to trust his feeling about something, because I think that is what drives you. That is what forms your beliefs. That's what pushes you in certain directions. If something, you gravitate towards things that feel good to you, that resonate with you, you know, you gravitate towards people that, you know, can articulate certain things that you might be feeling, but you just couldn't say it the way that they could. And you drift away, or you reject certain things that don't feel right for you. So even though There are some people that are growing up in racist households. You know, there are white children that are being brought up in racist white households. I do not believe that it's inherent within them to take on that belief, even if they're puppets, right? They're kids right now and they're saying they're doing what their parents need them to do. But I do believe that there's an opportunity for those children, because there is something that in some of them just doesn't feel right. Whatever that is, they might not be able to articulate it, but once they get out into a world where they are on their own and have time to catch their breath and think for themselves on why doesn't this make me feel right? What's going on? What is it about this that doesn't sit well with me? So, you know, I'm trying to raise a child that's an independent thinker, that if he doesn't like something, I question, it's okay not to like something. Why don't you like it? Dig deeper. I'm trying to teach him to interrogate his feelings a bit further than I don't like that.
Right.
I ask him, what don't you like? I don't like what they said. What did they say? Why don't you like that? What would you want to say to them? So it's encouraging him just to question a bit further, because I think in general, specifically, I don't think maybe male children are encouraged to do that as much as girl children are. I think girl children, people come around them and they encourage to talk about their feelings, and girls come around and they talk. And I mean, they talk their feelings to the nth degree. Whereas in South Africa, as we can see, just from gender-based violence, men are not talking enough. You know what I mean? They're not talking enough to them with themselves. So as soon as a man is feeling threatened, or he's angry, or he's frustrated, or he feels disrespected, he doesn't know how to articulate that properly. He doesn't know what to do with all of those feelings. And so he'll explode. And that explosion is something that he can control. It's a fist in a face, right? So, you know, it's not just towards like the beliefs around racism. It's about also just keeping in check and staying in check with yourself. As an individual, can you identify what uncomfortable feels like? Can you identify what anxiety feels like? Anger and frustration. All of those are different feelings. All of those come from different parts, but you won't be able to identify what those things are unless you interrogate what was it about that situation that was off for you. So, you know, I tell people that my child is not mine. He has to live in a world without me. I'm supposed to raise a global citizen that can function in society. You know, that I hope one day he doesn't grow up to be a serial killer or a rapist. I'm sure every parent feels that way. But, you know, if I'm not trying to keep him in check with his own feelings and to identify what works for him, that works for me. That doesn't work for me. Why does something not work for you? And also, I think something else that I'm trying to get him to get in touch with is empathy. Like, if you are empathetic, you can completely resonate with somebody else, even if you don't look like them at all, right? So all of the allies, so heterosexuals who say that they are allies to homosexuals, you know, people who are comfortable in their gender, cisgender people who say that they are allies with transgender people, white people who are saying that they are in line with Black Lives Matter. Those people need to have deep wells of empathy, because they're not fighting the same fight. They are actually, you know, that's not their fight to fight, but they can stand as allies. But the reason you can only be a good ally if you can forget yourself and put yourself in somebody else's position and feel like, wow, if that happened to me, how would I feel? I would feel enraged. I would feel pissed off. I would feel hurt. I would feel not seen and not validated.
Right. Look, thank you so much for your time. This has been a fantastic interview. I think the spontaneous ones without planned questions are always the best, you know, and you rocked it. So thank you for your time.
Always. Thank you so much for having me.
No
You
worries.
made me think about a lot of things. So thank you for that. Like, my brain, I'm wide awake now.
Awesome.
So thank you for the opportunity of just like